I know you might have thought that it's not happening. It is happening. I am just late because I had a session. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Today is a new era of the sessions because A, I did not forget to invite the speaker. Alex, hello. Thank you so much for joining. And B, I didn't forget to switch off the meeting room. So I
Hello.
didn't have to admit you the whole hour. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's going to be a good one already. Alex, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's a bit overcast in here in Ireland, so probably a little bit more gloomy than usual, but all good. How are you?
It's gloomy in Barcelona today as well, but there is no bad weather in Barcelona, so I will never complain. You will
Yeah,
not
that's
hear me
fair.
complain. It's still beautiful, and I might even have some tapas afterwards. Let's see. Let's see to celebrate another amazing one. Okay, so I'm not going to speak for too long. I'm going to just make a quick introduction. I don't have slides or whatsoever. These are our homey sessions, right? You are the speaker. We're just going to let everyone couple of minutes to join in. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I have Claude calls you super fans. I actually told him it's a he because he tells me what to do, not to do that. But it's really funny because I have some people who've been to like 5 and 6 sessions. It's crazy. Thank you so much for like taking the time. Hope you're learning something. So three things that I want to mention, and then Alex is gonna grab a mic. First of all, in the last couple of weeks, so many people reached out to me, and many of you are grabbing some of the videos or the frameworks and all of those things that I have created and creating their own templates, resources, and things like that. I'm honestly amazed and like impressed. This is amazing. But if you do that, please do get to me because there are a couple of problems about it. First of all, it's kind of plagiarism if you don't, right? So you just copy basically the things that I share and then kind of pack it and then you start distributing it. But the bigger problem here is that every time when I look at the resource, I can see things that I would not recommend doing, actually against the advice that I'm doing, right? Like for the portfolios and for the CVs. And then the issue with that thing is that you put in my name next to the advice that I'm not given, and then people gonna, it's gonna create a lot of backlash, and we're gonna spread misinformation. So I would definitely encourage continue doing that, but I'm opening my doors and like I am happy to review and give feedback, and we can rework it together, and then reach more people together. But please do not just copy paste and pack because there's always something that is missing and something very important because otherwise I would not be here. The second part is that if anyone sees my paid partnerships on LinkedIn, please engage. Those sessions are always free, as you can see, and they bi-weekly, and they are possible to be free just because I'm able to secure the sponsors and basically kind of contribute for this time. I want to continue educating and bringing people like Alex. Alex is going to give us like a fire talk today. When I listened to the pre-brief, I was like, I have nothing to add. This is great. Just go and do things. We're going to learn a lot today. So yes, if that is not a big problem for anyone, engage in even with a small post, it just helps me to keep sponsors, make it meaningful and engagement for them, and then continue investing my time in those sessions, in briefing speakers, in preparing all the resources, which is a lot of time. So I really appreciate all of you. But yes, please do that. And then three, I am going to be running my new product at the end of September. Wow, look at us. It's a promotional session. I never actually sell anything on those. This is the first time. Feels weird, but everything that you start in the beginning feels weird. So, yes, if anyone is interested in working with me on growing your authority and then hosting your own sessions and getting your own paid LinkedIn posts, let me know because that is going to be a really good one. And it's going to be the third cohort actually that I'm running. So I'm very excited. It's really happening. Okay, I zip it up. The links and everything is on my LinkedIn. You know where to find me if you need a question. Alex, let us start with an introduction. Let us hear what you've been building, what you've been doing, what are you doing? And yeah, the mic is yours.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Let me just quickly share my screen. So yeah, thanks so much, folks, for joining today. As Lena mentioned, I'm gonna start with a quick intro. So I'm Alex. design director at HubSpot, where I'm running this AI experimentation org, where we're inventing the future of what GTM experiences should look like, how both sort of go-to-market reps, like people working on go-to-market teams, like in sales, in support, in success, type of context can be 10 times more effective than they are right now. But also, how can we actually change like all the different motions that companies generally go to market, where humans maybe are not part of that flow, that aren't really in the loop, and like a lot of people that would land on the marketing website, for example, of a company would actually be buying directly from an AI agent or getting support or getting sort of help to stay retained and understand what is the value that the product would be sort of bringing to them right from that AI agent. So that's the type of stuff that we've been working on in HubSpot. Prior to that, I spent a decade at Intercom working on all parts of our product in there. But in the last few years specifically, I was building this product called Fin, which was one of the first AI agents on the market. I learned a ton just about both what it takes to actually build adoptable AI first, AI native experiences, but also what it takes to help to transform the team to be a lot more AI native and AI forward. And apart from that, I also don't just kind of lead teams. I also build a lot of stuff myself with AI, from little apps to video games and stuff like that. Um, so through kind of all of those experiences in the last 3 to 4 years now, I've learned a lot about what it means to actually work on AI and work with AI, but also to build what it means to and what it takes to kind of build AI native teams, and ultimately what type of skills and behaviors people that succeed in this type of work actually tend to have. So that's basically what today is going to be about. And without further ado, gonna just jump into it. Um, so there's this watchmaker called Epijorn. If you're not deep into watches, you probably never heard of him, but in the horological community, he is basically a bit of a legend. What makes him special is the obsession that he has with the craft at every single level, especially in his early years. He would not just design a watch and, hand it off to a factory, but he would personally shape every single piece, like the idea, the dial, the case, the movement, like everything would go through him and be changed and improved and shaped and made by him by hand, all to extraordinary standard. And on every one of his watches, like, there's this Latin phrase on the dial, which is the motto of the company, and it says "Invenit efficit," which is invented and made. And I have been thinking a lot about this phrase recently, especially when you think about where AI is going, where design is going, and what I look for now when hiring designers. I think this phrase is a really good description of the job that all of us have in front of us in the future. You basically need to invent. So you basically need to understand the problem, you need to notice the opportunity, you need to form a point of view, shape the vision, and figure out what is actually worth doing. But then you actually need to make things, right? Like you need to build the thing, put it in front of people, like ship it, learn from what happens and iterate based on that. Not one or the other, you kind of need to do both. That sounds obvious, but I think it's a fairly big change from the way that many of us in product design have been historically trained to think about the discipline. Like for most of the past decades, product teams have pretty clear, well-established lanes, right? You would have PMs who would identify the problem, you'd have designers who would shape a solution, you'd have engineers who would make all of those solutions real, and then you would have GTM teams that would took them to market, and everyone kind of like knew their place, knew where they stood. And AI is massively collapsed in the distance between all these different roles. A designer now can jump directly into code, can point an edge in sort of like a design system and just actually shape something real, something that is shipped to all customers straight away in minutes, where like a PM can actually explore solutions directly instead of needing a designer at all. Like an engineer can actually get much closer to a problem without sort of waiting for some sort of requirements document. And an operator in go-to-market team can actually like just like spot a workflow that is not working and just build a AI vibe coded prototype that will fix it. And so like ideas are becoming a lot more real, demoable, testable, sort of much faster. And so I kind of want to spend the next hour or so on a few questions. Right, like first is like why the AI design is even like a relevant thing to think about and talk about, and why we're kind of all becoming AI designers in a way. The second thing is like what do we actually mean by that? Or like I think like there's a lot more to AI design than just kind of thinking about it as like sparkly icon that you need to put somewhere in the product. The third thing is basically both myself but also other folks who are hiring candidates in this environment. What are we actually looking for and assessing when we are um, thinking about an addition to our teams? And then if you actually want to get into the space, if you want to sort of have success through um, your experience getting in the job market, you know, what what would make it easier for a hiring manager to basically say yes? Um, I think like at the very high level, the market has changed. Like our roles are changing, and I think like I would love to really make it like super clear and explicit how all things how all of that sort of developed and sort of why and what it means for us. Um, I I don't think that I need to kind of tell anyone in the room about the rate of the change. You know, like every time you kind of stop and pause and look around, like the slope of the curve of the innovation is steeper and steeper and steeper. And I think there are two main forces that are driving that. Like on one hand, the first one is economic, right? Like which is like during the COVID years, there was this boom in hiring. The zero interest rate environment was ultimately making capital extremely cheap. Companies were hiring aggressively, and growth at pretty much any cost was rewarded in the public markets, but in the sort of private markets and so on. And so leaders were heavily measured on hiring, retention, culture, like those types of things. But then you kind of gets into a situation that we've been in like pretty much from 2002, 2003, where efficiency, throughput, ROI matter a lot more. It's an employer's market. Like there are a lot more good people looking for roles, and so companies are asking a very specific question, really, like which is like, what's the smallest, strongest team that we need to have in order to build these types of things that we need to build? And I think like on its own, that would have just naturally raised the expectations for hiring, but also for retaining people. But I think like on top of that, then you have AI that's landing on top of that, and like research, high fidelity mockups, prototype and code, things that used to require several people and a lot of coordination can now be easily done autonomously or with like a very little oversight. And so it is both much easier to actually get the work done, but also because it is much easier to get the work done, the surfaces that we use to get the work done are changing. And so, like in the past, if you needed to sort of get stuff done in a digital space, right? Like you needed to create actual software, some sort of an interface that people would look at and take actions, actually can like point and click and do something. And so naturally that required kind of someone to think through like what that interface would look like, how it would work, all of those things. But in a world where AI can actually get stuff done for you, not only the interface itself can be created by AI a lot more, but also you have a lot more situations where the interface is just like it's not needed because AI will just get it done for you automatically without you needing to kind of touch anything. And so that makes kind of traditional UI layer a lot different and sort of like the requirement for it. And then at the same time, this like tools are getting better as at this thing that I think we as designers were consistently treating as our mode, which is taste. Right? Like 6 or 9 months ago, I think like this comforting story that everyone had was that, well, like engineering might be disrupted because AI can now build things, but designers will be fine because we have good taste, we have good product judgment, we will ultimately direct what gets built. But what happens when kind of taste becomes basically just like a skills.md file? Or like what happens when the next generation of models is not just better at code, but better at reasoning and product creation end to end? And honestly, I don't know where this leads, and kind of nobody does, right? Like, but I think that there's this illustration from Alice in the Wonderland, like that talks about it takes all the running that you can do just to keep in the same place, and if you want to go somewhere, you must run at least twice as fast as that, which is I think like a really good articulation of our current point in time. Um, so we don't really know what the future looks like, but we definitely know that it will not look like it is right now. I personally see this three clear trends where the roles are blending, the org is flattening, and then the baseline is rising. So the first trend is basically all about the fact that adjacent skills are basically getting easier to access for everyone, right? Like designers can now prototype deeper into the implementation, engineers can understand the problems directly, PMs can actually make things themselves. And so the center of gravity is kind of shifting a lot more towards end-to-end builders, right? Like people who can understand the problem, decide what to build, and then actually ship it. And I can imagine that like in 12 months time, like a smaller group of deep specialists, like whether that's design engineers or system designers or people working on component patterns like foundations that everyone else uses would still sort of be like doing the more sort of specialized work. But then I think like the majority of us will ultimately move a lot more into this like builder shaped role. Like, yes, like with our own spikes and strengths, but I think that it definitely would be a lot less separated and siloed than it is right now. And I think the reality is that it kind of you can think about it as like, oh, like, but who will be best positioned in this world, right? Like, will it be like engineers because they kind of know how to code already? But then, as the modals get better at actual coding, deep engineering knowledge becomes less of a mode that it is. Like maybe PMs will be much better positioned because they often DRIs in projects and they are expected to identify the right problems to actually solve. But then strong designers and engineers for ages have been doing that type of stuff as well, pretty well. And then maybe you can say that like, well, like, actually, like it's designers who are well positioned because we bring the taste, we bring the ability to shape the vision, ability to make things tangible. But again, taste can be increasingly encoded and instructed. And so I honestly don't think that there's like any particular role that is automatically better positioned in this world. I think designers sort of like have very much a lot of useful skills that make us uh, well positioned for success, but so are others. And so I think that like the reality is there's going to be like a bit of a democratization of just product building, right? Like the barrier between thinking of an idea and actually shipping it ultimately is collapsing. Anyone can do it. And in a world where like anyone can do it, everyone has to step up. Right? Like we are not just competing with other designers, even when you're going out there and kind of considering like for hiring, considering to be to apply for a role, for example, you're not really competing just with other designers. You're also competing with PMs, with engineers, with operators, with everyone who is now empowered with this increasingly capable tools that make them really good at things that used to make us unique. So the second the second trend that I'm seeing is that the org chart is flattening. And you know, like traditional management layers, they kind of existed partly for accountability, partly for the information flow between different layers. You needed kind of people to move context between different parts of the organization. You need to track status, follow up, you know, make sure things got actually to completion. And I think AI can increasingly support a lot of that work. And so there's already like a clear trend where there's less and less of pure management roles and a lot more of player coach roles at every level. So like people who build themselves, but also support, unblock, and raise the bar for other people around them, and maybe like for agents as well, right? And I think that it's not just happening to the management where like, oh, like now managers need to kind of code. It also just is happening from the other side to super ICs that, you know, like not only are now doing purely the actual product work, but also are supposed increasingly to help out their peers and help out others and mentor others in what sort of they need to do. Um, and the third trend is basically, I think, the one that matters kind of the most. And I'll talk about this a bit more in next sections. But it's basically like high agency. Like how much of an agency do you actually have in this world? Where like in the world where everyone has roughly this like same superpowers, same modals, same tools, same ability to do things. You know, the differentiation ultimately kind of comes down to like who does that, right? Like who actually kind of takes the time to do those things. Like who sees the opportunity, who acts on it, like who does not wait to be asked. And I think this definitely, like all of these three trends, they are changing just the environment of what a strong candidate in the market actually looks like. Before I go there, though, I wanted to just kind of like take a bit of a detour and just super quickly talk about what I actually mean by AI design. Um, because I think like for me, the AI design at the end of the day, and being an AI designer is ultimately still product design at the end of the day, right? Like you're still trying to understand the real problem. You're still trying to create an experience that solves that problem. And I think that's the main difference is just in like when you build in this AI first, AI native experiences, you're ultimately thinking about the behavior of the AI itself, that non-deterministic behavior, as much as you're thinking about the sort of interface layer itself. Like you're kind of, I think like you need to have this a bit of a whole product thinking, right? Like where you're like instead of like trying to like neatly think about the sort of like what happens when, you know, on the screen when the user sort of like presses a button, like what's that story, what's that journey. You really are also designing like what the system actually understands, what context it has, like what it can do, what it should do by itself, like what it should ask for, when it should ask for help, and then like how would somebody steer it, like all of those different things, right? Like the interface is obviously still important, but it's just like it's not the whole product anymore. And I think this is the biggest difference, at least to me, which is like, you know, like for most of the traditional software, I think there was this very predictable relationship between what you designed and then what actually could be shipped. Like, you know, we would work in Figma, we would create some sort of sensible, viable prototype. Yeah, like we'll need to think a bit. We'll need to probably like test it. We'll need to kind of like go through a bunch of different options. We'll need to kind of like spend proper muscles and time on shaping the right solution. But at the end of the day, if it exists, it sort of like can be done, right? Like, and if you can think through it, like most of the time, like engineering would be able to implement it correctly, because like it would be able to do the thing every single time. But then when you are thinking about the AI experiences, like you can obviously design this like beautiful interaction around this like perfect answer that the AI should deliver, but you know, at the end of the day, when you actually connect the real model, when you actually like start looking at the limitations and the constraints, the solution that you were thinking about may just be completely wrong, and like you need to kind of design around those limitations and those constraints and the reality of kind of like how the thing works and what it does, and the reality of the thing also being like this evolving organism that, you know, like capabilities yesterday that it has are actually like a lot worse than the capabilities that it has tomorrow. And so like how do you actually like, make sure that you're designing ahead of that innovation curve is kind of like another important thing to balance. And yeah, like I think like at the end of the day, like you need to really like deeply think about not just this kind of like happy path, but like really understand what needs to be built um, as a full product, not just kind of on the interface layer, but beyond. And I think the reality as well is that we're doing all of this stuff in the world that has not really settled yet. Or like technology keeps changing all the time. The capabilities keep changing. The way people interact with these systems keep changing, right? So there is just um, very practical, I think, the consequence of that, which is like you just cannot design a good AI first experience entirely in theory. You actually have to build it with AI. You know, like you need to make sure that you're using context and real models and real data and real tools, you know, like in order to shape the experience and yeah, like I'll ultimately like turn those kind of like different messy inputs into something that actually makes sense. And I think this means that designers sort of get much closer to how the product is actually built, how it works on the sort of back end. And like sometimes that does mean, and most of the times that does mean like creating this like working prototype with like Claude Code or you know codecs or whatever else you're using, and it might sort of mean that you need to sort of you need to set up the right workflows, you need to think through the right ways of building it and sort of experimenting with it. And I don't think that this means that every designer will now become this machine learning engineer ultimately, right? Like I do think that the reality is that you just cannot design presentation layer without kind of like really deeply thinking about the behaviors underneath. And this is kind of, I think, like the one big difference for AI design specifically compared to like a more traditional classic product design. But despite all of those differences, ultimately the fundamentals are still the same, right? Like you still need to start with a real problem. You still need to understand the person, their context, like the outcomes that they're trying to do. How can you deliver the value? How can you solve it in the most simple, elegant way possible? Right? You still need to collaborate with other people. So you still need to build ultimately towards the same shared system. And all of those types of things that have been always true for us in product design are still true in AI design. But I think that the a lot of the process that we're considering and talking about, and historically, you know, like you would hear all this advice. I think like a lot of that is now definitely going to go into a bin, and it's like if you know if you're showing another sort of like portfolio with those like post-it notes from like 2020, I just really don't think that you are setting yourself up for success, right? Like, and instead, I think like focusing on like showcasing how you're thinking and experimenting and building and changing your process with those AI tools is a much more impactful lever for thinking about your career as a designer, but also thinking about how to succeed in this market. Um, I think that there are this three stages that like AI design has basically kind of gone through. Where like the first stage was this like sparkly button, which is like you know like you just like take the existing product, you just like add a small AI action button on top of it, for like write this for me, summarize this for me, like rewrite this email, you know, like make this sound friendly, whatever it is, right? Like, um, I think like it sort of made sense at that sort of point in time and whatever, like 2002, 2022, 2023. But I think the underlying sort of products and workflow basically stayed the same. And AI helped with like one small step within it, but ultimately, like we did not really think through the whole experience in any way differently than we used to before. And then I think like came the chatbot, which was this, you know, instead of giving people this like one small AI capability, what was happening is that like we gave them this ability to sort of ask for almost anything, right? Like where you would have to understand kind of like what the system could do. You could have a conversation with that AI system, and with maybe like a decent prompt, you would actually get something useful out of it. But ultimately, like it was still again like that. just like the blank text box that can be incredibly powerful, but also for majority of people would not really like add that much of a difference. And then I think like we've now been for like at least a year probably, like maybe a little bit less, but we've been in this third stage, which is like actually like having like systems that actually do things for you, right? And like in here, it's like more like you give the system the outcome. It actually understands something about your context, about your goals, and it can then sort of like find the relevant information, use the tools, take the sequence of actions, and kind of like come back when the work has been done. And I think that ultimately a lot of those types of experiences still include chat, but chat is no longer sort of like the crux of that experience. Like the completed work is ultimately like what you're paying for, what you are building, and what you are delivering. And yeah, all three can be really useful, but I think like the reality is that uh, all of those things sort of require a slightly different way of thinking about the interfaces, thinking about design itself, and kind of like by building each one of those sort of experiences with my teams, I've definitely learned like three key lessons about sort of like what actually works when you are designing for this AI experiences and like what it actually what those good experiences actually tend to have in common. The first one is that usually you focus on having one clear job, right? Like it's like you're not trying to make something like vaguely helpful, right? Like it's you usually try to make something like really excellent for someone very specific, right? Like for doing something like very specific. So I think like a clear job makes that experience much easier to understand, and then like the system's behavior itself much easier to shape, and then like value much easier to prove, right? Like it helps you to basically decide like what type of context we actually need to give that system in order to ensure that it will not be hallucinating or providing suboptimal outcomes for you. And that does not mean that like one job will ultimately be like one tiny feature, right? Like it means kind of like one coherent purpose, one coherent thing that that sort of that system can actually do for you. I think like it comes both because like, you can nail it much better as a team, but also I do think that it comes down to its ability to build trust with the user themselves. And I think trust is a big kind of still thing for like a lot of those AI experiences because they're so non-deterministic, because they're so sort of ephemeral a lot of times, right? Like I think like when you know that this thing can actually do this like one particular job extremely well, I think it's so much better than having like some sort of universal assistant that kind of claims to do everything but then is mediocre at a bunch of those things. The second lesson that I've kind of learned is about the experiences that you're building ultimately needing to like remove real effort for like really something that would be valuable, not just like another fucking tool to manage, or like something that actually brings me the value and makes my life easier, saves me time, saves me effort, saves me headcount, whatever that is, right? Like something that will remove steps, remove kind of like some repetitive decisions, remove coordination, remove sort of like the need to spend time doing the thing. And like I think the practical thing we're trying to ask every time we're gonna build in something new is like what does the person no longer have to actually do if like we build actually that thing. And yeah, I think like if you don't have a clear answer to that, like probably like this is not the highest impact piece of work to focus on. And then the third thing that we've kind of, and I've personally kind of seen, has basically been around um, the first time that someone actually uses your product. I think that you need to optimize around making sure that they're going to be wowed. And I kind of don't mean like adding some sort of like sparkles and fireworks and confetti or whatever, right? Like it's more like the result that they get out of it like needs to make people think like holy shit, that actually like that's done it, like like now that's much better than what I expected, sort of, right? Like, and I think like a lot of times that can be like about the quality of the outputs. It can be about just the fact that it actually has worked despite the sort of limitations, or kind of showed smartness by like through doing it. But I think like ultimately like all of this is about just like making sure that the value is like very, very, very quickly felt by the person using this on the other side, or by the business that you're trying to automate it for. So um, yeah, at the end of the day, like figuring out like how can you create that emotional response to your design work, I think is especially kind of true and especially important in this time. So those are kind of like the three main things that I've kind of seen, like making sure that you give the AI one clear job, making sure that you are removing real effort from someone, and then making sure that ultimately you're making that first run truly unforgettable. Which kind of at the end of the day, really, this is basically like what I mean by kind of AI design. I think it's still product design, but I think like the behavior of the system is just like now part of what you design and kind of how you design it, how you build it. Which brings me to this like hiring question, which is really like what actually like tells me that someone can do this work well. Um, So a few years ago, I was at Intercom and we had a few staff designers, like super strong folks, and several wanted to get to principal. And the problem was that like all of our principals that we've had over the years, they have been like a bit more of a kind of Renaissance people, where early designers to Intercom could kind of do anything at a very high level, like whether you needed someone to be a sort of thought leader and write a series of posts about kind of how the industry should evolve, like they would be able to do it. Whether you needed to kind of build up the culture in the team, they would be able to do it. Whether they needed to solve a really ambiguous, complex system design problem, no problem, right? Like they would be able to do it. Or like if you needed them to get into the pixels and like really solve some particular visual design challenges, again, hold my beer. They're gonna be able to get it done. It was a very, very high bar and maybe like not a very fair one. So we tried to help, and like all the people here is kind of like we put together this document. Like here's basically what we expect like our folks who want to get to a principle to actually do, and sort of like here's the levers that you need to pull. Here's like where you need to focus, and we kind of thought that it was clear and explicit, but then a few months later, it became pretty obvious that every single person have read the same guidance, but then kind of interpreted it like very differently. Like where like some folks just like focused on, thinking that they need to kind of double down on craft. Others thought that actually they need to basically focus on hiring and people leadership. Others thought that they kind of like needed to do to focus on like thought leadership, all of the stuff like that. And I think like this is like a very, very human thing to do. Like you kind of go through the checklist where like you everything seems important, everything seems kind of like a critical thing to nail. And so I think like a lot of times that's exactly the same thing like when you're going through as a job seeker, for example, when you're going through the process, you're kind of trying to optimize straight away for all the different things. So whenever you're hearing someone talk about like an AI designer, like if you love craft, like you hear that, oh, like the taste is important, and like the this is the last human mode. If you love the strategy, you hear that, well, like now designer is actually going to be set in the direction, and that's the product thinking that you need to focus on. If you love code, you can actually like figure that actually like everyone is becoming a design engineer, and you basically need to focus on that. Or if you're less hands-on, you kind of hear that, well, like leadership and orchestration, that's actually the skill to focus on. So I kind of I want to make sure that like I try to be like as like focused and direct and like really like prioritize things for you in this kind of breakdown. But like obviously this is like from based on my experiences hiring folks and working with a lot of AI designers. This is based on like things that I've seen in the industry. But ultimately, like this is something that you will definitely need to sort of like figure out for yourself, and like what do you actually would like to prioritize and focus on, and kind of like where do you think you will have the fastest sort of path to like to an outcome. So at the highest level, I care about two things, right? Like the first one is, can this person set the direction of where the product should go? Like obviously like at their appropriate level. That can be like at a feature level, that can be at a group level, that can be at product line level or the company level, whatever is kind of the level that you're operating at. Like ultimately, like what I want to see is like, can you set a direction that is going to be clear and sort of like rally people around? And then the second thing is like, can this person actually deliver or oversee this like high quality execution? Um, when I look at the portfolio, when I interview somebody, like there are six specific signals that help me build confidence in those two things, right? Like making sure that that those things are true. So the first one is ultimately craft. It's like I think like AI has not made craft irrelevant. I think like if anything, the flood of okay designs and outputs have made the judgment and the quality more important. I think it definitely like raised the sort of floor for everyone. Like you can actually like produce much better work by default, but it also did raise or put even more sort of importance on folks who are able to raise the ceiling for everyone else. And so like ultimately what I when I look at the work, I'm asking a pretty simple question of is the experience thoughtful? Like, do the interactions make sense? Is the visual design strong and consistent? Like, does the person think in systems rather than in isolated screens? Did they actually like explore meaningfully, or did they just kind of one shot a bunch of things and just hope for the best? And I think like at the end of the day, like for candidates, this is like making sure that you're just like not going to be burying your strongest work behind the slides and slides of process that you've sort of gone through. Like ultimately lead with craft, like put your sharpest visuals up front. Like craft is number one thing that like myself and a majority of other hiring managers in this time are looking for. Like at the very least, like make sure that you have the fundamentals. Like spacing, alignment, hierarchy, copy. Interaction, judgment, whatever else. And I think like if the ship work that you've done does not really show that ceiling of your skills. And like for what's worth, like a lot of times it doesn't for a lot of people, like for reasons that are not really dependent on them themselves. Like frankly, just like include like side projects, include like explorations that you've done apart from that are not based on your current company's design system or the limitations of it. Like ultimately, right? Like craft is obviously not the whole thing, but it is definitely the very first reason that like you actually like keep looking at the portfolio. The second thing is this AI curiosity, and I frankly like have this like weird filter when I hire folks. I kind of try to ask myself like, is this person a little bit of a tech nerd? Like are they are they like interested in just tech? Are they curious about like trying new products? Like, do they think of the tech as just like this is my job and I do it 9 to 5 and I don't care about like what's happening around me. I'm just gonna get my hours and that's it. Like or like are they actually like is this person like curious about what's happening in the industry? Like are they trying different new apps that are coming out? Like are they messing with the products that are out there just to see kind of like what's possible, what breaks, and like frankly, like AI is changing what it means to have expertise in tech. The tools, the processes, the patterns, all of that is changing in real time, and I think like people who will be successful will be ones that are able to kind of see and stitch together all this like messy half-baked experiments that are happening right now. Like nobody has the AI design figured out yet. But I really want to make sure that so like I'm seeing the person playing with it, the person being curious about it, whether it's like gifs of like scrappy prototypes they put together, some sort of a personal workflow they sped up, like a little project they vibe coded, whatever else. Ultimately, like the best thing you can do is just like show that you are curious. Like I'm personally, like I have this this little ritual. Like every week or two, I do what they call like museum walk, where basically I have this like folder of a bunch of bookmarks that I look through, like product hunt and a bunch of other like Reddit, a bunch of other places for like making sure that I take a look at new product that launched, like some landing pages, some interaction design patterns, like whatever else the internet has cooked up, basically. And like not always is great, but I think it's always just helps to expand that personal library of like what's out there. Um, the third signal that I'm looking for is ultimately all about agency, right? Like it's like I think like a lot of times I've been in the calls with folks like in hiring manager conversations, and I'd hear like really like talented people just waiting for permission. Like they would say like, "Oh, I really want to explore AI, but my company like does not really work like that. Like we're pretty kind of like outdated. There are like no processes. Like there are no kind of like I don't have like licenses for all these different tools." And like, oh, I would like really love to kind of like work on like strategy more, but it's not really my role. And I totally understand it. Like the roles, the structure, the scope, like difficult managers, like all of that stuff is real, and all of that stuff is like a real constraint sometimes. But after a while, like all of those things just kind of become comfortable excuses, right? Like where like nobody's stopping you from learning, from building, from experimenting. Like the curiosity kind of does not need a job description. Like if you want to play with AI, just like build something on the side. Like if you want to do higher impact work, just pick a massive problem and go fix it, right? Like I think that there's this like a lot of times we kind of catch ourselves thinking we're like well like someone should really do it, like if only like the environment around me would be better, and kind of like assuming that like it's like someone else's job. But I think that like at the end of the day, like they are usually not coming, right? Like and like we are the cavalry, like we really need to like ourselves like go and do something about like our own lives and our own sort of jobs. So I think like this is a lot of times like what you really need, especially when things are changing so much. You really need that agency. You need to show that you are a self-starter. You need to show that you're able to just do things despite sometimes the environment, even if like, that's the unfortunate reality of where you're at right now. Um, the next thing that I really, especially like true for kind of like more senior roles, but kind of true throughout, is this like causal impact, which is like ultimately right like this like vibe that turns me off immediately, which is like I was in the room when it happened, right? Like slide after slide, you kind of like hear the person talking about like, well, like, this is what the team has done, like all this like milestones, all the results, all the history lessons, but then it's like a really cool story. But then like if you swap the person with someone else, would anything have changed? Right? Like would anything actually be different? And if you disappeared, would anyone notice? And I'm ultimately trying to understand, like, not whether you were around great work when it was happening, but whether it happened, like that great work happened because you were there, right? Like, and I think like it's really important to make sure that you are communicating that through your story. Like, was there sort of no momentum before you came to the project, and because you were there, it actually sort of it actually happened. Like, was there something that you've done specifically that helped to progress the project forward or move it to a different direction? And I really want to caveat this with like something really important, because I think like sometimes folks kind of take this a little bit to an extreme and tell this like really incredible superhero stories. But I think like I had this like kind of some time ago. I had like two different people come into an interview, and one was the mid-level designer. They kind of told this case study about how they set the vision, convinced the C-suite in a big public company on what needed to be done, changed basically the trajectory of that whole company. Sounded epic, but also like really didn't match the level that that person was at, and kind of what they showed in other interviews. It kind of really felt off. And then I was kind of like months later interviewing a staff designer from the same exact company, like telling exactly the same story, with like a lot of the same sort of milestones and a lot of the same sort of story points. But like this time, where like their version was like a lot more about kind of like designing, aligning other designers that were around them, and kind of like pushing the project despite kind of like struggling with it, struggling to land it with leadership that was really opinionated, kind of slowly moving things forward. And it was messier, but also like far more believable. And so I think that it's also kind of like right, like important to keep in mind that like yes, like make sure to like really highlight your role and your impact, but also make sure to kind of ensure that it's going to be believable. Like talented people generally tend to create impact beyond their level, and it's totally fine if that was the case in your case. But kind of tell me why it was possible, right? Like, was there like some sort of organizational vacuum, like a leader who cleared the path, whatever else? I think this is another thing that I'm trying to kind of get a signal on. The fifth one is basically all about having a clear spike. And I think like a lot of the interviews sometimes kind of get into this like box checking exercise where like did they sort of like show a system diagram checking, like did they explore several options checking, like did they kind of talk about outcomes check check check, you know. And this is all fine, but I think like a lot of times this can distract you from like the thing that is really really critical and really important, which is like what is this person like really good at? Like what is the spike? Like is it like visual design, product sense, storytelling, AI sort of literacy, like whatever else, right? Um I really I think that there is like a, even in the world where we will be potentially moving into a lot more blended roles, I think like having that particular superpower, that particular thing that actually separates you from the rest, that particular thing that tends to kind of make the team generally better because you are part of that team, I think is a really, really important thing to think through and highlight as you're kind of going through the interview process. And the last signal that I'm trying to kind of gauge when I'm interviewing folks is basically like their level of energy, right? Like, and I really don't mean this in a sort of oh like you need to be an extrovert type of thing, right? Like or like create some sort of like a performance or like turn the interview into motivational speech. But I think like the reality is like this is a messy time. Nobody has built like a stable, clear playbook of what actually like adoptable AI first experiences look like. Like everyone is experimenting, things are changing all the time. And I think like people that thrive are sort of people that stay curious, keep momentum, remain excited like through all of that chaos, despite all of that chaos. And so like you can definitely feel all of that stuff like through the Zoom, right? Like everyone sort of like has something that lights them up, something that excites them. And so I think like thinking about the interview process as a selling experience, just like as a hiring manager, my job is to sort of like excite you. Not it's like it's not only to assess you, right? Like it's to excite you about this opportunity. It's to excite you, to sell you on the journey, to sell you that you know you can do the best work of your career with this team. And similarly, like as a candidate, like you're kind of doing the same, right? Like you're not only showing your skills, you're kind of helping the hiring manager to feel excited to work with you, to feel like it's going to be a safe bet. And so these are the kind of like the six signals that I'm thinking about: the craft, the AI curiosity, the agency, the causal impact, the clear spike, and the high energy. Now let's kind of like turn those signals into some like practical advice. I think like about the two sort of stages in the process that I think like are probably kind of like the most important like early on in the funnel. And the first one is basically the portfolio that you've created. And the second one is the actual sort of like hiring manager interview or like portfolio presentation, depending on the company. So ultimately, I think like your design, like a really important thing to note is like your design portfolio is just a movie trailer, right? Like nobody's watching the whole film yet. Like they're still kind of like deciding whether it's worth buying a ticket, right? Like you probably will have like frankly, you probably will have like 30 seconds that someone will look at your website, at your portfolio, and so like make those 30 seconds count. Um, there are three like really fast yes signals in the portfolio, right? Like the first one is just like lead with the crowd. We've kind of talked about that already, right? Like just like show your sharpest work immediately. Right? Like do not make me read through a bunch of stuff to understand whether or not you have the skills, whether or not you have the range. Like are you basically a designer that's able to design just like in one like dribble style or something? Like, or actually do you have like different examples of different all kind of strong examples of work? Um, Show me like a few styles basically, right? Like, and at the very least, just like make sure that the fundamentals are going to be clean and clear. The second thing is basically like show that AI curiosity, right? Like, don't tell me that you're passionate about AI or something like that. Just like drop the links, drop the GIFs, drop the videos, whatever else, like prototypes, any other kind of explanation of what you have actually done that will demonstrate that you use AI in your day to day, and you're not just gonna like at a stage where you're still sort of talking to ChatGPT about some copy improvements. You're actually like deeply integrating about AI into your work, and you're trying it out, and you're kind of building some of those experience. I'm gonna be like happy to hire someone who's still early in that space and sort of like pay them to build that deeper expertise. But I really need to see like that hunger to learn, that you're not waiting for that learning to start when you're gonna like get hired, but you're already kind of like going on that journey yourself. And the third one is just like remember just like to show that sneak peek at the rest of the stuff that you have, right? Like keep the first pass light, right? Like hint that you can think in systems, hint that you can diverge and converge, that you can collaborate and navigate complexity, and you can tell the story, but you don't need to kind of like write this like massive sort of case study that no one will be reading through anyways. So craft AI curiosity and clarity. Like if you nail the first two, I think you're pretty much gonna like most of the way to a yes, and the third one just gonna helps to just clear any doubt. After you've done that, right, like you're moving into the that actual sort of like presentation, the portfolio stage, and I think like the work itself ultimately is just like half of the equation. Like the other half is ultimately telling the story to someone that will sort of excite them. Right, like keep it simple. Right, like show me what was at stake. Like really, like this AI can be really good at that. By the way, like helping you to kind of like drop that narrative. Like show the actual work. What actually were your kind of personal contributions? Right, like land that out, and how did you land those outcomes? Need to walk me through like all the workshops, all the sticky notes, all the screens, all of those things. Like think through like how can you tell the story where the other person, especially in the or like remote first world, will not be sort of like looking on the other side at their kind of Slack or doing something else, but like actually to keep them engaged through listening to your story and your narrative. The second thing is just like make sure that you kind of show me the blood and gore, right? Like, show me what made the work difficult, right? Like, where the things actually stuck? Like, what did you do to unblock things? Like, what were the decisions that matter? Like, and show me those like explorations, prototypes, the designs that help you move through those moments. Like, how did you influence people around you? And like, most importantly, like, make sure that your kind of story will contain some of those points where something happened because you were there, right? Like make sure that it's like very concrete, like what your contributions were, right? Like don't kind of yeah, obviously kind of give the team the credit, but don't kind of hide under the we. Like myself and other hiring managers really need to understand what would be difficult, different, sorry, if you were not there, right? Like ultimately packaging the story, packaging that narrative it cannot sort of like manufacture a lot of impact, but I think like the weak story can really hide the strong work. So make it easy for folks to see the stakes, the quality of your thinking, and why we should hire you. Um, I know that like there is like a lot of stuff that I can talk through already. And I know that there is like a lot of things that are changing and a lot of different companies that are and people on the different stages of this journey. And a lot of especially like after a few years that AI has been around and like people have been building those experiences and shipping those experiences, it can sometimes feel like you are behind. It can sometimes feel like um, you know you like everyone is ahead right now and you're still sort of like trying to catch up. But I do think that there's like one thought that makes me like really encouraged, and I think this is like a very optimistic point in time in general. Yes, the bar is going up. Yes, AI changes what the baseline output looks like, and I think the same performance that was meeting expectations 2 years ago is just not gonna meet expectations today. And not because like you got worse, but because just the world expects a lot more. Uh, but I do think that the reality is that like, even even with all the progress that has happened, nobody's very far ahead. Like most people building this space have had a few years of real experience ahead of you. Like if that. Some of the best work that I've seen so far has been from people who started recently, got obsessed, and just kept going and going and going. Um, I once heard this line, which is like, "You're only months away from being in a decent run-in shape." Right? Like day one, you jog for 5 minutes and you just nearly die. Like day 30, you're actually like running 3 miles and it's not a problem, right? And I feel like this is exactly where we're at with AI. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be curious. You need to try the products that other people are building out there. You need to see what works and what breaks. You need to borrow ideas and you need to remix them. Just like pick some messy problem, build something small, speed up one particular thing for yourself, get it in front of somebody, just learn. Um, I think that you don't need to wait for an AI design title before you start doing AI design work. Career growth does not happen sort of to you, it happens because of you. And I guess the roles are blending and the org is flattening and the high agency is going to be the differentiator. None of this is comfortable, but I also think this is one of the most exciting times to be in our profession. There's just like so much to explore, so much to invent, so much to figure out, so much to screw up. It's just like, it's frankly encouraging. And like things that were impossible a year ago are not only possible, but actually achievable in a weekend. The cost of actually trying things is just going down, and the reward for like just doing things is going up. So you can just do things. You can go out there, you can invent the future, and you can make it real. Thank you.
Whoa. Amazing stuff. Alex, thank you so much. You are a master of storytelling and analogies. I loved it. So many, and I'm sure we all, as you can see by the reactions of everyone, there's so many questions to you. Um,
Sorry, I haven't actually been able to see the chat in the Zoom. They hide it.
Things are happening. Things are
Yeah,
happening.
amazing.
Yeah. So there are many questions. This time I've actually wrote them down so we can go one by one. But also, folks asked if we can roast a couple of portfolios and you would share your hiring manager perspective on like what you see and what you think on it. Like, what do you think about that? Are we open to it? Yeah, cool. Okay, so here's Adriana's. So you can share just your screen. Oh, sorry, my whisper. Okay, I'm gonna post it in the chat. Can you see the chat?
Oh, I
Let me
can,
find
yeah.
you in the chat and I can send you in the chat.
This is
Boom.
perfect. Yeah, I'm opening it up. Let me just share my
Yeah.
screen again. All right. Um, so first off, really like, and I'm gonna be um trying to do this in as sort of realistic way as possible, in a sense of where like I'll first gonna do like a very quick pass in a way that majority of hiring managers actually do it, and then I'll kind of go into a little bit more of the details. So the moment I'm opening it up, just like the first thing that I'm like straight away trying to just see is the general layout of the page. Like, is it well put together? Is it well designed? Like, is there something that's just gonna jump into me that's a bit of a red flag? And so like that's the first sort of check that I'm um, trying to do. And so like the first impression is like super, super important. Like there is almost no excuse for not kind of like making the baseline to be kind of solid. And like in this case, like that definitely looks good. Like that kind of like baseline check, it passes that. Like the information is like clearly laid out, or like I can see, like who the person is. I can see basically like what they're doing, and I can straight away see that there is There's some visuals in there that I can gonna get a sense of the design work that this person has done. Um, like I would at this point go into like one um random example and like just like try to like frankly just like try to see like very quickly like what is the quality like, what are the designs looking like in terms of both the general sense of like is there a sign of kind of high level of craftsmanship, or is there a sign of high level of complexity. And one other thing that like whenever I would kind of like notice that like some things are kind of like okay, for example, or like but maybe like others are a little bit less maybe polished than I would expect in just like the hierarchy or the visual design, and I would kind of try to understand like what is the sort of what are the timelines that we're talking about in here? And like one of the things that just like jumped out straight away to me is that it was like a work from 2018, which actually is like big red flag to me, like straight away, because that seems like a really old piece of work. I'm like that was like what you were like as a designer 8 years ago. Like a lot of people, right, like have kind of had like just have started and left careers in that time, and like I think you can actually can change a lot in that period of time. So one small piece of feedback is that I would actually like not try to like, it's okay to share like some work that you've done maybe like from a long time ago, but when I see that there are like just three case studies and like one of them is like from 8 years ago, that's definitely not a kind of strong flag for me. Like, this is kind of like better, right? Like this is like a 2024, which I'm gonna be like going through again like super quickly, trying to understand like what that product is about and like what it is. Like one thing that like, jumps out straight away again in here is there's the like I think like the quality itself is okay, but I do think that the level of complexity is something that I'm definitely sort of like uh, questioning right now, which is especially because like this is like a senior designer role, right? Like or the senior designer person, which like it seems like a basically a very simple wizard that you've created, and I think that like, that's basically it, right? Like we're talking about just like three steps. I really don't see like what is the meat, what is the sort of complexity involved in it. Like very standard sort of piece of some sort of like a whatever, like an estimate, like tax calculator type of a design, right? Like and it just like it is really like not showing me that kind of blood and gore that I was mentioning, like not showing that sort of complexity straight away. And then like when I'm looking at some of the details as well, like we're kind of like there seems to be like a lot of stuff going on in here, right? Like where like you have like on the left hand side you have this like three different steps, all with numbers, and then like inside of this step number three, you also have a few several separate steps, and those steps are actually kind of like layered into this two different columns, which makes it like much harder for me even kind of like imagining myself kind of going through this experience as a user makes it really hard for me to sort of navigate, right? Because like I would probably have to sort of remember that from the spatially, I'm like going through the steps in the wizard, but then also inside of this particular step, I have this steps that I need to go through in first column, and then this third step sort of like that I need to go through in the second column. So even if you want to keep this type of a layout for one reason or another, I would definitely kind of question the need to show sort of the numbers, especially given that the third step is not really even a step. It's just actually kind of showing you the output of your estimate, which is like, do you even need to show that or like straight away? So like those are the types of things that would just like jump out to me straight away and kind of I would probably pass on this, like, and I don't know if like the person is in the room, but I would really, like, I would probably pass on this, despite kind of having a pretty optimistic sort of point of view at the very first impression when I looked at the general sort of layout of the portfolio. But then when looking into the details of it, it seems like some of the work is just like too old, and then like another piece of work seems to be like still kind of quite old, like 2 years ago at this point. And also sort of like I have like some questions about the complexity and also the design details in here. So that would be my main feedback. And I would probably just like to be absolutely frank again. I would probably not even go into the third use case, which just for the sake, which is again like an interesting one. Like this is like an actually like a much more recent project with a lot of like from what I can see, right, like prompt systems, like maybe actually even some like AI work. But because of how it was laid out, right, like that those projects that were like a lot more sort of old were actually kind of presented first. That sort of like biased me to like straight away go to a no, even though maybe like by looking at the last sort of example, I would actually be a much more of a likely, much more likely to say yes, because I actually like even from a quick glance, it seems like that is a much more interesting and complicated and kind of more AI related sort of use case.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alex. 100%. I'm backing you up. To be honest, when I saw 2018, I was like, I would close it right away. I wouldn't even go down, to be honest. And this is something like that I always say, most relevant, most impactful, and in our time, most recent, right? Because when you see a work of like 3 years ago already, it is very different. It's still very solid to show, but I don't know, like all the designers who have given the talks in the last couple of months, they all have built super relevant and super recent case studies to get a new job in the last year. So I feel it's almost impossible to actually do that without. What's your take? Can you really pass without the like 2025 six portfolio, like the case study?
I think the reality is that there's just like it's really hard to find an excuse for that, right? Like, and you don't need to again, like you don't need to make it a project from your work. Like seriously, like there are so many companies out there, like good companies that just like don't do anything that has to do with AI. Anything that like companies that we would happily hire designers from. But if your portfolio in 2026 doesn't show anything that's related to AI work, or kind of working with AI at least, right? Like that would definitely be a red flag. And I think like generally, especially because of how fast it is possible to improve, I think like I definitely want to see that you are on a kind of particular growth trajectory that shows that when we sort of hire you, you will be moving even faster and you will accelerate even more, right? Like I want to see that like over the last kind of like few years, like there is a delta in the quality of your designs and the improvement, or like maybe like that doesn't have to be, by the way, like about craft specifically. That can be about the complexity. That can be about something else, right? But I ultimately want to see that the pace of improvement that is shown in your portfolio.
Amazing.
And like there's this question from Ingrid on the hobby projects. 100%. I think it's frankly, I think it's just it's good thing to do. Like it shows the range as well, right? Like ultimately, like you want to showcase all of your all of your skill sets that you have, and rather than be limited by the constraints of your current job.
There was another very interesting question. A person has built a case studies and like has done projects in I'm not sure what was the year, but basically it was before the cloud and everything. And now they're wondering if they were to present it or like they build the portfolio and show the projects without AI, is it worth to add a section and say, if I was to build it with AI, this is how I would approach my workflow now?
Yeah. So in Meta, over the years, they've had this thing when you were going as a candidate through the interview process, they would say to you that like if you feel that your work is not representative of where your skills are at right now, please redesign those screens from the case study so that you actually present something that you can uh, be proud of and will show basically us your skills right now rather than your skills back then or your constraints back then.
Yeah,
And I think it's a very good sort of lesson for all of us.
absolutely. I love it. Okay, so we have 15 minutes to go. We can review another portfolio. We can go into the Q&As. Any preferences from anyone? Alex, what would you prefer?
I can see there are tons and tons of questions, so maybe it might be better to focus on on covering a bunch of questions rather than just a few portfolios. But happy either way.
Okay, cool. So the first question was from a person. So they said, I agree on taste, yet I would like to hear how you, Alex, would define and defend that. What makes good taste and how it is formed?
I think there are several like several things to keep in mind is that like obviously taste is a thing that is very subjective sometimes and can be like we do not always share. But what we are trying to do, at least like internally for my teams, for example, and people that I'm working with, or like our design team more broadly, across like both at Intercom, but also at HubSpot now. It's like we're trying to define both the principles of what good taste actually means for us, for our context. And that's like very much kind of similar to the sort of traditional design principles almost, right? Like one of the when it comes to like system design, for example, one of the really good and helpful, useful principles that we used to have at Intercom was simple by default and powerful under the hood, which was a really good uh, thing to keep in mind when you're assessing the work of like, are you actually uh, letting the user pay the tax on the complexity, or are you actually sort of chewing that complexity yourself, like thinking it through and presenting like, the thing that they actually need, and then kind of allowing them to get that extra power if they need, or for those folks that need it. And so like the principles are like one part of it, and the second part is like making them tangible with examples. And so like we would have this like both inside of PubSpot and at Intercom, we would have this like very tangible examples both from our company and like what we have shipped or designed that looks good and we think is a good representation of each principle or each or general kind of good taste. And we would basically make those examples tangible and show those examples both from stuff that we've done ourselves, stuff that we've seen in other products, and stuff that we've done that is not actually representative of those things, which is also kind of like a very useful exercise, which is like a very ego-less in a sense that like we all kind of like sometimes make mistakes or make compromises based on different things, but like these decisions have actually been that are live in the product right now have actually been kind of wrong decisions that like we should not be striving to ship or design going forward. So I think like that ultimately like it's better to have like very tangible set of principles and very tangible set of examples that help you to understand what taste means for each particular company or for each particular context.
I love this for sure. I've always like, this is always like a chicken and the egg because obviously sometimes you show similar portfolios, like myself as an agency recruiter, and like one company would say, "Oh, it's the best portfolio," and then the second company would be like, "Oh, why are you even showing that to us?" I've had those instances, and that's why I always say like, identify your top companies and try to understand what they define as taste, in the storytelling, like through the people, like in the visual language that they're using as well. And that is a great opportunity to actually have a meaningful conversation with them too. You kind of touched on it, but if you were to break down the difference between AI designers and product designers, if there's any.
I think this is still a very much emerging set of disciplines. Just like in the past, we would have mobile designers versus web designers, and at some point it just blended back into like this role of product designers, or like we would have UX designers, and then we would have visual designers. And I think that there's always this set of pendulum swings. I think like as the new technology emerges, where we first try to sort of unbundle things because you need those specialized skills. And then as the technology becomes more and more mature, you actually end up bundling things, and you have those kind of like folks that are like more like generalist roles. And so I think like when we started maybe like a few years ago, there's definitely a lot more of a difference between AI designers and kind of more classic traditional designers. Like back at Intercom, we even like split them into two different career paths. But I think that now it's actually a lot more convergent. Like everyone who's actually ultimately working on those AI experiences needs to think about the same principles and the same set of things.
I agree. I totally agree here. Interesting. So the question was, what languages or platforms do you find your dev teams and your infra teams working with? And how does that mold the way think about what is, well, sorry, I cannot read that. I've had such a long day, as you can tell. Let me post it to you and you can read it yourself because it's a very long one. How does that mold the way think about what is possible when designing for AI?
Sorry, I haven't actually seen where you've posted it,
Oh, it's
or
in the chat. I just
oh
shared
yeah, I can see
it.
it. Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in private chat. Yeah. Um, so look, I think that the reality is that there are very real limitations a lot of times with the work that we do in a kind of corporate environment. When you're lucky to work in a small, tiny startup where like everyone is building on this AI first and bleeding edge sort of tech platforms and tech frameworks that make it super easy to just go and do things with AI and ship things with AI. Like at Intercom, we used to have our main product that was built on this GS, like JavaScript framework called Ember, which is like not that kind of massively popular and pretty sort of specialized. And I was terrible at so kind of understanding it. And so like whenever we would try to uh, encourage our designers to ship code into production, we would actually really struggle for them to deliver high quality work, and they would just like spend much more time trying to ship those things based on that sort of like outdated infrastructure compared to some other folks that were working on other parts of our product, like our messenger, for example, that our Fin was, which is like AI agent, was actually operating, which was so much easier because it was written in React, and the all the uh, LLMs are extremely good at kind of writing React code. And so you would have actually folks having a lot more success with creating more impact by actually shipping code into production and doing things themselves. And so there's definitely this like limitation on what we can even do in our process based on the limitations of the framework that you have. But I think like at the end of the day, right, like this is if that's true for you, for example, that definitely doesn't have to be true for your side projects or some little experiments that you're doing. You can always showcase your skills, regardless of the complexity of how your current company works. Through just like other small experiments. And again, those experiments, they don't need to take massive amount of time. They can be really quick and easy.
I love it. Okay, that was very technical, as you can see for me. So that is, I guess, the last one that we'll be able to touch base. I'm sharing it in the chat. I'm sharing it with you, and I can read it. It's a little bit longer as well. Curious at HubSpot, are there still instances where designers still use Figma or even AI design tool? We obviously had Tanya last week on the session where she said, "Haven't opened Figma in months." What do you see? Is it the same for everyone?
I don't think it's the same for everyone. I think there is a spectrum as always, right? Like you always have different levels of adoption, and there are in different companies, like including HubSpot, there are just like different types of work that folks are doing, and different types of technical constraints and limitations. The like I think the path to adoption has definitely been uneven. like folks in my org has mostly moved to Cloud Code. Well, Cursor first and then Cloud Code around a year ago because we were sort of working on a lot of bleeding edge experiences from that point in time. Um, Folks in majority of HubSpot teams, I would say they're still relying and using Figma quite actively in their work. There's a lot of stuff that I would say the company needs to do first in order to also kind of enable folks to do things faster, better. And so like a lot of work that actually went into our design system and like all the actual AI enablement from the kind of tool creation perspective has definitely also slowed things down. So again, like when people had to use AI tools and move to AI tools because that was the crux of the job that they needed to do, that sort of made sense. But then for the vast majority of folks, like it's still a journey that people are on, and yeah, I think it's just the nature of any. I think like any company, that any company needs to go through that process of um, yes, help kind of everyone who's curious and who needs to work on this to do it easily and fast, but then like actually gonna do the unsexy and hard work of helping everyone else to actually
Mm.
adopt all of those tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us your tech stack? I think that is a short kind of question uh, to cover.
I think there's a, I think there's a frankly like um, this pendulum swings of like love and hate in AI, where like where uh every quarter you think that someone is fucked or like someone is actually on top of things and you kind of switch like there's almost like no switching costs right now to
Yeah.
tools and kind of like um, no loyalty, no loyalty at all. And so I think like for well, a year ago, for example, I would be like pretty much living in Cursor. I really loved the philosophy of it and ability to actually sort of like touch the code. And like frankly, like, I have been like pretty technical even before this, so like it was sort of natural. But then as Claude Code started to become, especially after like Opus 4.5, I think, right, like in November last year, after it became just like really good at just like doing things for you, it just like made no sense to continue using tools like Cursor that actually were a little bit more involved. And so I just completely switched to Claude Code as my main tool of choice for pretty much everything. And I think like now like in the last few months or so, I've actually like been like really struggling with Claude Code for one reason or another, and the quality of it. And like at the same time, there is Codex that actually has become so much better, and just like generally, like ChatGPT is kind of like it feels back on track.
Yeah.
And so again, like this is like now my model of choice for a majority of questions, and my kind of harness of choice for a majority of things that I'm doing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I am extremely unloyal as well. I'm changing them day by day. I'm with you. Alex, thank you so much. That was incredible. That was so inspirational, informative, so deep and so many examples. Like we really, really appreciate you taking all this time. There are so many questions in the chat, but it's not possible. So we'll definitely invite you for the part two of our no podcast kind of conversation. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate you folks for coming on and yeah, asking all these questions. Like really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Lena, for organizing it.
Of course. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye, Alex. Thank
See you
you.
folks.